Okay, we're back on, and let's see, next will be the MCLE.
Yeah, we are running a little bit of schedule, but I think I have seen Todd and Asia and Bobby, so I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick introduction. The MCLE board is here today for a proposed amendment to APR 11. And in the room is Todd Alberstone, the chair of the MCLE board, and online is Asia Wright, a member of the MCLE board. So I would let them take it away.
Obviously, it's important for me to get proper education on the uses of technology. I'd just like to say good afternoon, President Clark, Executive Director Nevitt, and the governors. Thank you so much for having the MCLE board present our proposed amendment to APR 11. I'm Todd Alberstone. I'm the current chair of the MCLE board, and I've been on the board for 6 years. My colleague Asia Wright is online with us today. She's a past chair of the MCLE board and has also been on the board for 6 years. Between us, I've presented at least 3 times to this body, and she has presented at least 2 times to this body. And I'd like to say, just on a personal note, it's important to warn you. So the reason Asia couldn't be here with us today, and I wish she were, is because she has a newborn. So it's entirely possible that she will have to drop off, and we all understand that. It also means that she can't kick me under the table. So there may be welcome interruptions. I say welcome interruptions from Asia along the way, because there's no way for her to sort of put her hand out and kind of grab the microphone. But we'll muddle through somehow. The amendment that we propose today is a joint effort of our entire board, with deep involvement from the WSBA staff, particularly those who deal with MCLE and who deal particularly with MCLE reporting and tracking and MCLE compliance, and answer questions from WSBA members concerning MCLE requirements and fulfilling them, and the online interface, and those who do initial reviews on petitions, etc. At its heart, this amendment is simple. We are asking that a requirement be added for 1 hour every 3 years concerning technology and data security, 1 hour of MCLE every 3 years concerning mental health, including substance abuse. There is no change in the total number of credits required. And although we are moving the equity and elimination of bias requirement to a different place in Rule 11, there is no change to the requirement for that either, nor the total number of ethics required. Everything else other than those 2 requirements, which we believe substantively are ideas whose time has more than come, everything else other than those is simply designed for simplicity of reporting and tracking MCLE credits on a 3-year cycle, including streamlining for both the members and the WSBA staff. So the red line may seem complicated, but the end result, we believe, will be streamlined and clear. These two proposed substantive requirements, like ethics itself, are in topic areas that we believe are sorely needed and yet are often overlooked. I will say I personally am the sort of person who, left to my own devices, would tend to choose CLEs and do choose CLEs in areas in which I currently practice and want to become more expert, or in areas in which I believe my practice might be evolving, or I might wish it to evolve, as the case may be, rather than necessarily choosing things that are off those topics of practice areas that are specific to me. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about technology security, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about mental health. Along the way, I encourage people to interrupt with questions, and Asia also will certainly jump in if I've forgotten anything or wants to add anything as well, and we'll respond to questions as well. So first, I'd like to note, just impromptu, Governor Angelvel's comments concerning AI earlier in this very meeting. And while I know that most of us are watching with bated breath the rapid growth of artificial intelligence tools and how courts and bar associations and legislators and legal professionals will respond to them. Requiring legal professionals, I'm just going to say it, requiring legal professionals to stay up to date on technological developments that may impact the practice of law and the administration of justice, requiring them to stay up to date with 1 hour once every 3 years can be one small part of the overall response to the rise of AI as well as to the rise of cyber criminals. RPC 1.1 specifically calls out that legal professionals should keep abreast of changes in law and practice, including particularly the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. While our memo in your materials cites extensive sources, and data, I'd simply highlight, according to an ABA survey in 2021, only 53% of law firms have a policy to manage data retention and destruction at all, any sort of policy, including hard copy, right? And only 36% of them have an incident response plan. Yet, a quarter of law firms nationwide have reported, or were reporting then, that they've had some sort of data breach or technology security breach that they know of. And that, of course, doesn't include the ones that don't know what they might have already experienced. The FBI Compliance Center, commonly known as IC3 in 2021, estimates that $6.9 billion in losses in 2021 from ID theft, phishing, data breaches, and so forth. As much of a nightmare as it would be to have one's identity stolen or one's personal information stolen or one's money or secrets, one's confidential information stolen directly or from a bank or financial institution, how much more of a nightmare is it to have it stolen from the one place where you should hope that you can trust that you can be completely honest and provide any and all data, which is to your legal representatives, right? So that is even that much more of a nightmare if it comes through your own lawyer or your own legal professional. The ABA has been warning of threats by data breaches and cyber threats since at least 2018. It's not a new problem, but it's a problem that's on the rise. And I'd just like to point out, just anecdotally, I don't have data to back it up, but since we're relying on a survey from 2021, how many of us were really thinking in 2021 about, if we had responded to that survey, how the rise of artificial intelligence, chatbots, and so forth might impact the legal profession? Technology changes rapidly, and it's important that legal professionals stay up to date on it. And it's important also from the perspective of administration of justice, integrity of the practice, protection of clients, and our public reputation. So a data security CLE credit should be mandatory because a lack of knowledge can result in harm to clients and difficult professional dilemmas. How to respond to a particular breach if and when, more likely when, one occurs. How to use public Wi-Fi safely. The use of artificial intelligence through chatbots and other means to communicate with clients or with third parties or the courts. What are the issues around texting and unencrypted email and so forth? Thus far, we've seen New York, Florida, North Carolina, and the US Virgin Islands add similar requirements. And with the rise of AI, no doubt we will see more. We believe this requirement is both timely and necessary. And I'm going to pause for a moment if anyone has questions or comments or concerns specifically with respect to data security before I move on to mental health.
Thank you. It's a terrifying thought to think that from 2012 to 2015, I was the leading attorney in the insurance coverage world for cyber coverage. It was a task put onto us by one of my insurance clients at the time because they wanted to know what the future was going to hold. And I'd said sentient robots, and they needed to start planning for it. So to answer your question, who's been thinking about this? I have for over a decade. And my biggest question is, who's going to put on this information? And how is it going to be? Because the fact that everyone has, I mean, there's some uniformity like Clio or Gusto for payroll, but I use a system different than others. And so to be secure for me versus what Perkins needs to be secure, who do you envision, assuming this passes, where is this information going to come from? How is it going to be relevant? So if I go to a seminar, for example, I switched practices in 2015 to become an estate planning attorney. And I thought, I need to learn about this. So I went to the big UW estate planning conference held every November at the convention center. That was not for me. And it was 3 days, very expensive, good credits, but waste of my time for knowledge. Where do you see the person being the one? Because this isn't a court decision where very brilliant people are saying this is what the Blake decision means and how it's impacted. This is going to be a constant moving needle of trying to get ahead of insert bad guy here that's trying to break into our computers. And, you know, what was considered good security is now changed to you need dual verification. I mean, it's even the security is changing quickly. So who are we going to be looking to supporting a West publication? I mean, where do you see the information coming from?
I think that's an excellent question, Asia.
Yes, that's a great question. If I could jump in, thank you for allowing me to attend remotely. My understanding is there are CLEs out there that address security issues and ethical dilemmas right now. There are CLE providers that already address this. And we actually, when we brought this amendment up early in my tenure, this is when we proposed 3 credits. This is the same technology credit, but we've made some changes to the language that the Board of Governors actually made a decision to offer such classes on this topic for free on demand to the members so that it would not be financially or logistically burdensome to the membership. So it's out there already.
So if I can just push back on that and say, when I started my firm and a couple of years in, and once I realized I needed to start doing more technology, I went to, and I won't name the name of the third-party for-profit company that did the CLE. They basically spent an hour saying, I have an ethical obligation to make sure I'm protecting my data and don't go and use a coffee open Wi-Fi with, you know, all the things right there. It was very general. It was not useful. It did not instruct me how to get a VPN or how a VPN works or any of those things. So I again, yes, what's out there is reminding us of our duties as attorneys to know how things work beyond how to send an email. But I still am not seeing why, beyond our duty to do that, and that I may face some disciplinary trouble if I am subject to a breach that becomes public and is known about and reported, if it's not going to actually be targeted to training and being competent to know how to protect, I'm not seeing how that's out there. And again, what my system is versus what's used at larger firms or even other solos is so broad that I don't know that it's feasible to really make it something that's a requirement that we have people go to when it's, you know, making someone go and I'm not a commercial truck driver. To make me sit through an hour of how to drive and how to properly drive a commercial 18-wheeler is a waste of my time. I mean, not the perfect analogy, but that's what I worry about if we go to and say, you must check this box, even though we can't guarantee that there's going to be something for you that actually relates to your situation.
If I may address that, I think, you know, and I understand your point. I think, unfortunately, people don't have even the basics for understanding what the dangers out there. And I'll give you personal experience. When I was working at a law firm, our paralegal, because we're a personal injury boutique firm dealing with a lot of FedEx packages, got this email saying your FedEx package is delayed. Click here to check the status. She clicked on it, and and that's a very basic thing. It's not we're not talking about Perkins Coie level of security. We're just talking about just clicking a link, and we had the ransomware and could not get into our computers. And fortunately, we did have an IT person come in and get everything back for us, but there was a delay. And to my horror, we never told our clients what happened. And I think that was troublesome that we didn't say. We just went on as nothing happened, didn't report it, didn't do anything. And I hope that the ransomware did not take our information, our confidential information, and put it out there. But we don't know.
I'd also add, if I may, I think your example about estate planning is the perfect one. I'm sorry to say that it's not my area of practice, but I perforce have been required to learn the basics of estate planning and estate administration over the last 3 years. And as a result of having to actually administer an estate, I did take some CLEs on estate administration, estate planning, and particularly trust administration. I think it's certainly true that there can be a wide variation among practitioners about what they need to get out of any given CLE course or what the nature of their practice is. And even in the world of, really any particular area of law you could pick, IP is an area that I practice in. What a licensing lawyer needs to know is very different from somebody who practices before the USPTO. But I do think, there's a certain amount of, pick the right course. But I do think historically the WSBA staff and the MCLE board have been good about reviewing courses for whether they meet our requirements. We're not perfect and we can't review every course, but we're pretty good, at least WSBA staff are pretty good about reviewing courses and ensuring a kind of a level of quality. And the last thing I'd say about where does it come from, the answer is at both the need for these courses as well as an increasing number of jurisdictions require them will motivate MCLE providers, both those that are not for profit as well as those that are for profit, to provide greater and greater courses and with a greater wealth of choices. And I will say, as somebody who's coming from who's licensed in 2 states, the other state that I'm licensed in is California, which for many decades has had the mental health requirement, although it's changed during the time that I've been a practitioner. Over time, the number of courses available and the variations on those courses has exploded. So,
and I totally agree with Todd. I wanted to just emphasize that if you build it, they will come. I think we've seen that with the CLE requirement that we just made mandatory, the mitigation of bias, that now providers are targeting that credit and they are creating new content. If you feel that the content is not good enough currently, it's once they see that we have that requirement, they'll start generating the material.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm really fascinated by this discussion, and I do think it's connected to the need for a technology committee and the need to recognize what AI could mean to our profession ethically. And speaking of ethics, I am curious as to what our esteemed Chief Disciplinary Counsel thinks about the nexus between the RPC that Mr. Albertson just mentioned, and the need for a credit. I'm just curious to know what you think, Doug.
May I be recognized? I'm going to direct some thoughts to our presenter, Mr. Alberstone, because when the when the equity and inclusion credit was under consideration some years ago, you came before the board, and you may remember we had a colloquy about it. I remember.
I certainly do.
And one of the things I inquired about was why displace one of the 6 ethics credits with the equity and inclusion credit, which I supported as an idea, but I had some concern about whether it should be displacing a minimum number of general ethics credits. And so that was the gist of our conversation. And I think you responded that it doesn't prevent lawyers from taking more general ethics credits. It just sets a minimum for equity and inclusion, which was fine as far as it goes. So actually, I'm pleased to see this proposal is pulling the equity and inclusion credit out and making it, I get a standalone credit, if that's a fair way to talk about it, as well as the mental health credit and the technology security credit. So now they're each a standalone credit that's not part and parcel of the ethics requirement. And one of the reasons I think that's important is because while there's an ethics component to each of those topics, equity and inclusion, technology and mental health, it's not exclusively ethics. Those are bigger, much bigger topics than pure ethics. So I think there is a relationship. I think it is ethically important, and there are things to learn about ethical obligations as they pertain to technology, but it's not strictly and only an ethics issue. It's bigger than that. While I have the floor, so I don't have to raise my hand again later, I do wonder still why we have reduced the number of pure ethics credits from its initial number of 6 to 5, rather than structuring the new 3 standalone credits in some other way that would have preserved the minimum 6 pure ethics or general ethics. Because I assume you don't have empirical data showing that we don't need to learn as much about ethics as we used to. So I'm wondering why we should be going down to 5.
Well, let me, if I may, give a brief answer and then also ask Asia to give an answer as well. And I'll tell you why it's a two-headed response. And that's because in that colloquy that you mentioned, at that time, the MCLE board was asking for all 3 of those requirements, which would have reduced, which would have taken up 3 out of 6 ethics requirements. And that was one of the objections, and one of the objections we heard from several people.
I had forgotten about that. My hair must have really been on fire. I forgot that part.
And after the murder of George Floyd, we came back with, we would have come back anyway, by the way, because we felt it was important. We came back with just the proposal for the equity, inclusion, mitigation, bias change, which only takes up 1. Our feeling at the time, I think it's fair to say, was that we felt it was more likely, we felt it was important, and we felt it was more likely to pass if it was acknowledged as an ethics, as a single ethics credit, taking up only 1, rather than increasing the ethics requirement to essentially 7, 6 plus 1. But actually, that presentation was my colleague Asia Wright.
Yes, and why we didn't pull it back and then go back to 6 is because we did have that colloquy with you and the second try, and we didn't want to go back and change it again of what we went back and had your approval and then ultimately the Supreme Court. So we decided just to change things with that credit as far as making it the housekeeping and clarifying that, but we didn't want to go back and kind of relitigate, so to speak, that credit. But we did hear you and we heard the feedback, and that's why we come back this time, but putting it into the taking it from the law and legal credit rather than the ethics credit. Or sorry, I misspoke. We're still having 15 law and legal. It's that other where you have the freedom. If you accept our proposal, members have the freedom to take 22 hours on whatever topics they desire.
I would just like to make the comment that I can appreciate this, and I believe Governor Couch as well, because as a member of the solo small practice section executive committee, we've been giving at least one of our programs at our annual conference for at least the last 5 years, if not much longer, on cybersecurity. And we have both Michael Cherry as well as Governor Couch, who's doing it this year, tag teaming and even bringing in other people, and even the judge that we just heard from at the family law conference, we're probably going to loop him in too, great on artificial intelligence and stuff. So I think that it can be made generic. And as incoming President-elect Angeville said, that creating some sort of technology task force or something, we're already behind the 8 ball on this, and it's ever evolving. And even for the old attorneys who are maybe even more inept in technology, they are perhaps the ones that will be targeted more because they don't understand the implications of that as much as, you know, the 20-something-year-olds who were basically born with a cell phone in their hand. So I think that a credit like this, not making it ethics, there are ways out there, and some sections have been doing it for a long time.
Thank you.
I'm thinking Kevin Platchy.
Yeah, thank you. I initially raised my hand to add on to Governor Williams-Ruth, add on a little bit of response to Governor Williams-Ruth's question about whether there are people out there who can actually speak to this stuff. And first of all, I just want to say the member wellness program, the practice management assistance program with WISBA, and our CLE program are all within the advancement department of the Washington State Bar. And we all provided feedback on this amendment to the MCLE board. And I want to thank you. I want to thank the MCLE board for listening to our feedback. And our feedback was that we support the amendments, but the initial language of tying these things to the ethics credits was very limiting to CLE providers and limiting to the content. So thank you for listening to that and for making these standalone credits. And so that is going to help the developers of CLE to really address these issues much more substantially and fully. And so to get to your question, Governor Williams-Ruth, as you know, as an operation that develops CLEs in all of these categories, the way they were originally proposed when the board voted to make the 3 credits mandatory, which were the cybersecurity, the bias, and health and wellness, it was all tied to ethics. And it was very difficult for us to find speakers who could pull in the ethics, the actual ethical rules, and talk about them, and also talk about the substantive content in each one of these. Because a lot of mental health providers, a lot of cybersecurity specialists don't know anything about the rules of professional conduct necessarily, and they don't know how to talk about them because they have no exposure to them. So having these as standalone credits is going to open this up dramatically. And as Governor Petrosic said, we have a lot of people inside our own membership who are experts in the field of cybersecurity. Michael Cherry is one. He did the free ethics credit in 2022 for cybersecurity. Governor Couch is another attorney that knows a great deal about cybersecurity, and there are many more. So I don't think we'll have a shortage of finding experts to talk about this, especially and in all three of these fields. And especially since the MCLE board really responded to the feedback and made these standalone credits. So again, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. So when I appreciate your presentation, I was thinking about what Governor Williams-Ruth had to say regarding the, I guess, seemingly distant past in terms of, you know, what courses were out there and what offerings were made. And I just wanted to kind of ask, were we to pass this, and maybe it's a question for Kevin as well, but how will you go about informing any of our members who are consumers what course X is like, or different from course Y, or different from course C, so that people kind of know, all right, this is what I want to hone in on, and not, quote, waste my time, or this is where I want to start just to get my feet wet and understand the lay of the land, and then go from beginner to intermediate to, you know, I have a much bigger firm now and the issues are becoming more complicated. Can you just speak to that in terms of offerings, so that it's not kind of potpourri offerings and you take your chances and you go to a CLE and it really doesn't really work for you in the hour that they might take?
Asia, do you want to take that one?
If I'm understanding the question, because we most recently went through this with the mitigation of bias credit, that when we see the petitions that come through for credit and requests, we're looking and making sure that the I want to say the content is such that it's up to our standards. And Bobby can also probably explain a little bit more in this, of we have had instances where we communicate with the memberships, if members, if they have questions, and saying these are the you can find credits here and these will fit what you're looking for. And if I'm understanding, there was a question about whether knowing if something is for beginners or advanced. I believe that the providers make that clear in their offerings. And sorry.
No, it was the whole idea of the comment regarding taking a course that is really a waste of my time, because, you know, what was offered really didn't meet what I have. And if I heard Director Platchy correctly, as well as this conversation, this is an area that there is growth, and we have people both within the association as well as others who are now over time, as this issue becomes more and more of a concern, actually developing more both offerings and offerings in a way that is more receptive to what the needs are, and an understanding that our various members may have different needs at different times, but it won't be a one size fits all, so that they don't waste their time. And, you know, because I was listening to that comment.
Well, I mean, I would just say I agree that those are important issues. I'd add that I think they apply maybe not to 100% of all CLEs or CLE categories, but they certainly apply to many of them. And again, I think the estate planning one is a perfect one, right? Because different people want to know different things about that, and a lot of the more sophisticated stuff about estate planning would be irrelevant to me. I'm not sure that our amendment can fix that problem across the board, but I think the place to start is if we believe as a general matter that our members are intelligent and can make, exercise their own judgment about what they need in their education. But that said, that there are areas where we particularly want them to become we want as a group for all of us to have some exposure and some minimum level of education. I think to some extent it's a question of how MCLE providers, including nonprofits, including WSBA itself, right, choose to describe courses, develop syllabi, present them online, and how consumers choose to choose one course over another. So I realize I'm kind of not giving a great answer. It's a bit of a punt, except to say our roles, the MCLE board and the staff members that support us, on this side of the house, as opposed to the side of the house within WSBA that actually offers CLEs, right? On this side of the house, the first baby step is to say people should take courses in technology security once every 3 years, and in mental health, substance abuse, et cetera, once every 3 years. And then to certify those courses, right? To review them, again, mostly a staff thing. But also the board does some of that or provides some input to make sure that minimum levels are reached. But beyond that, I don't know that it's our role to sort of prescribe more deeply than that. So I'm punting a little bit, but I believe that once required, the market will sort it out and the high quality courses will rise to the top. At least I hope that's the case.
And I see Bobby, your hand is up.
Yeah, I think Todd pretty much summed up most of what I was going to say, which is right. The MCLE board and the WSBA MCLE team, when they review activities or courses for a base standard, right? Of do they meet the standards that are in the rule, and do they fall within one of the approved subject areas? And so there's no way for staff to sort of say this one is a beginner course and this one's an expert course. That really does have to fall on the providers of the CLEs to identify those to the people that are wanting to attend those. And like Todd said, I think it's the same with all sorts of different subject matters. You see like intro to estate planning, and then you see like advanced estate planning techniques or something. There's all sorts of variations in courses that are available out there.
I see other hands raised. I don't know when I should move on to mental health.
Online, Nancy, please.
Thank you, Dan. First, I want to mention that our section hasn't taken a position yet because of the timing of when the materials came out and when our meetings were, but we'll have a comment down the road. So personally, as a member, this was intriguing, and I read the materials. In particular, I read the comments that people had submitted, and certainly seemed like there were many more comments that were negative than positive, and they seemed to raise other issues, primarily anti-DEI. You're telling me what to do. I'm not you. It's up to me what I should learn, etc. And so I worry about the potential political within our organization backlash against this proposal and against DEI. That it just heightens the opposition that's already there. There's no question that the information should be made available. It should be conveyed somehow to members, but it makes me wonder more if there's a different way other than requiring credits. One of the comments I remember was somebody saying, well, how many bar complaints are we getting about technology versus, the bar complaints that tend to focus on trust account violations? And so is this really a problem that needs credits? And I also thought about, some law firm that has 200 lawyers. Do they really need 200 people to take a credit about, how to deal with technology? Those kind of firms have staff that do that. If you talk to lawyers in big firms, they have not a clue how a trust account works, really, because they don't handle it. And similarly, on the mental health issues, you're going to be, I wonder if you can meet the needs of people with mental illness who probably don't recognize that they have that mental illness. Same thing as teaching someone about the dangers of alcoholism or drug addiction. The people you need to reach aren't the people who go to get the credit. So primarily my concern is about triggering more opposition to mandatory credits, triggering more opposition in particular to the DEI credits that are presently required. And that just reducing the number of DEI credits just dilutes something that's very important for us to keep on doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to let Asia respond, except I do want to say one important point just to the last thing that you just said, which is there is no change in our proposal to the DEI credit or equity and inclusion credit. As it is, it's still 1 hour every 3 years. It moves to a different bucket for ease of tracking, but it still is there. It doesn't increase or decrease. And I do also want to say, with respect to negative comments or complaints, I think that in the case, my own anecdotal experience, my observation is, in the case of equity, inclusion, and elimination of bias, there are many members who have strong feelings on all sides of the spectrum, and it inspired both positive, strongly positive, and inspired strongly negative comments, those proposals. By contrast, I think saying to the membership, we think it's a good idea if everyone become educated about technology 1 hour every 3 years, I think is not likely to inspire as many pro comments, because if you're in favor of it, it's not something you want to litigate or go to the polls to vote on. It's just something you're in favor of. You think it's a good idea. Whereas if you're against it, you may be more inspired to write a comment. That's a way of saying, I think it's those who are against it who are more likely to respond than in the case of certain other requirements. Asia, did you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. I just again want to stress it's no way watering down the DEI or the mitigation of bias credit. That is still very much, it was just a housekeeping change. And I know just having that in the proposal might have relitigated people feeling out and speaking out against that. And I know in reading the comments, people saying that it's irrelevant to many lawyers. And I know me personally, I don't like to be told what to do, but I also understand that, you know, it is not a right. It's not my right to practice. It's a privilege. And all the members, you know, we have mental health. Everybody has a brain, and we can't practice law without computers and the internet this day and age. So for me, you know, I'm very fortunate. I feel like I don't have mental health issues. Maybe I'm not self-aware that I do, but I consider myself mentally strong. And I feel like I am educated to know not to click on a link, but it is worth it to me to give 1 hour of my time every 3 years. That's the price I'm willing to pay if it's going to save one person, just one person, if it's something that they learned in the class, it resonated with them, or they see something in somebody else and they think maybe I should say something or reach out to them, or prevents a thief from taking our clients' money. To me, that's worth my time. It's worth it. And even though I personally might not feel like I have an issue, and in that, you know, a majority of the membership don't have issues, but it's to me worth my time if it's just 1 hour every 3 years. That's the price I'm willing to pay.
Okay, we're gonna go next to Jordan next, please, and then Tom.
This is a
and then Tom, sorry.
brilliant proposal. Oh, did I do it backwards? No, okay. This is a brilliant proposal. And I think you've probably got your votes, which is great. So I'll be very brief on this and say, on the mental health side, every lawyer should be going to therapy at least once a year, and most of us probably don't know that. So like, this is a great way to introduce people to that reality of that is just a fact of life. And on the technology, like we should support that. On the technology side, you know, I know some people think like I'm smart enough not to click on a link. Prepping for a CLA I'm going to do on technology and cybersecurity, I downloaded a packet sniffer to mess around a little bit today. And I know that not everyone in this room is using a VPN right now. If you don't understand what I said, proves my point. If you do, still proves my point. So there you go. Thank you guys for this. This is great.
Thank you.
Okay, Matthew, and then Tom.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Todd and Asia, for your hard work on this. It's a really important and timely topic. However, I'm going to differ with Jordan. I have some pretty considerable concerns about it. I don't think this is the right approach. I think WISBA should be providing a lot more resources, not imposing another set of specific MCLE requirements. I think those resources could include CLEs, but also practice guides, videos, training sessions, whatever. I think this is, as has been discussed, a great topic for the not quite yet formed technology task force that Governor-elect Angeville has discussed. I think the idea that 1 hour, and I know you've alluded to this, but like 1 hour every 3 years, it's going to somehow move the needle on people not falling prey to various technology security issues is kind of silly. And I think with respect, I think you gave short shrift to the responses of all the members and saying that, well, only the people that didn't like it responded. And like, it was a tremendous number of people that responded, 1,000 people, and the vast majority were against it. And it wasn't like some were like, they were complaining about equity issues, not even apparently understanding that there was no change to what was happening with the DEI. But there wasn't an issue of, I know that you've made changes to remove the ethics component for these two proposals, but at least the members, I'm not sure if you even saw one that would say, oh, well, if it was an ethics requirement, then I would support it. I think that was maybe a more technical issue of like from the providers and sort of how we're going to do this. So again, I think they're great topics. I do think that all lawyers would do well to educate themselves, take classes, do whatever. But I just don't think this is the right approach.
Thank you.
If I could just address, I know it's been commented about the number of negative comments that we had against this proposal, and I'd just like to remind you of when we brought to you the mitigation of bias, we had an outpouring of negative feedback and people speaking up against it, and the majority of governors voted to support it because they wanted to do the right thing. And I think that's what needs to be done here is, though it might be seemingly unpopular based on the feedback of people, this is what's needed.
Two things. One, I apologize for being not here at the beginning of this. I had a call I couldn't get out of. But two, on the 1 hour every 3 years, for better or worse, I do a lot of cybersecurity litigation now, and things change monthly. And so having a training today is not going to stop things 6 months from now, never mind 3 years from now. So I don't think the idea of once every 3 years is going to do much to move the needle at all. But I don't know what the solution is other than something like, from my perspective, doing a lot of this cyber fraud, cybersecurity stuff, it would have to be more than once a year. And it could be something as simple as, and I like your idea of just having something that is a guide or something that people, the one that's written in English so people understand it, but two, it's short so people actually, a lot of more people at least would read it, but also gives practical advice on, not just what you should do, but damn it, if you don't do it, this is going to happen to you. And you're going to really be up a creek, which is why you should actually pay attention. So I'll shut up now.
First of all, based on that spirited comment, I would say I think you should be teaching one of these courses. And I think, by the way, you should do it for the WSBA so that it's a free lunchtime course that everyone can take. Just saying. You're right. I don't think CLEs I don't think there's any social problem that you can name or any problem within the legal profession you can name for which a CLE requirement is a complete and comprehensive solution. It's simply moving in the right direction, but at least I believe it is. And certainly 1 hour every 3 years isn't enough, but I will, if I may, just the anecdote that I told offline is, so I have a close relative who's 8 years older than I am, not a practitioner in Washington, but a practitioner in California who had a long and successful career as a real estate lawyer. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. To this day, he still uses a fax machine. He only uses email as required by the Superior Court of the state of California. Which means he's required to use it with them and he's required to provide it to opposing counsel. But whenever possible, in all transactional matters, and if possible with litigation as well, he will not provide his own email address to his own clients. So it's fair to say the person I'm describing, and it's a real person, it's not sort of my hypothetical trying to stereotype somebody, it's an actual person, Exhibit A, is somebody who's tech phobic, right? And who has a minimal understanding of technology, but more important, doesn't want to know anything more, right? The world can advance without him. And I just don't think that's the world in which we live. So I agree, 1 hour every 3 years is not enough really for any topic that you'd say is an important topic, right? 1 hour is probably not enough. But to say, you got to do this, you got to at least be introduced to it. You have a selection of things that you can choose from that might be applicable to your practice. Hopefully you'll pick one that's applicable to you, I think is a step in the right direction. And I hope you'll teach one of these courses. I would certainly take it.
Okay, so at this point, is there anybody wants to make one or certainly?
And just to make sure that everyone's clear on sort of what's before us is the MCLE board can choose to take their proposal to the Supreme Court regardless. But they're seeking input from the Board of Governors. So this would be an opportunity for us to formally give our input in terms of whether we support the proposal or not.
And I just, if we've gotten kind of too far down the road, I don't have to, I did prepare something on mental health, but the statistics are all in the memo that we've provided. So I feel like we've addressed a lot of issues, but I'm certainly open to talking about the mental health requirement as well. I think in that case, even more so than technology, the statistics are just overwhelming in terms of how mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and anxiety and depression, not necessarily associated with substance abuse, impact the legal profession. And it's not just a question of whether the person who's having a problem takes the course. It's also a question of whether that person's partner takes the course, whether that person's, what to do if you discover that the judge you're in front of, the partner in your firm, or anybody else you're dealing with is having a problem, right? Not just you. So that's a very truncated version of the presentation.
I would move that the Board of Governors supports this proposal. And if there's a second, I'd like to speak on that briefly.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Sure.
All right, thank you. So I think there's a lot of truth to this is not going to solve problems. I think for some people, it will initiate conversations. For others, it will be a reminder. For many, it will do nothing but be an easy thing to resolve. And I'm reminded of if someone is bleeding out on the ground and they're going to need surgery, you don't refuse to apply a tourniquet because they still need surgery, right? Like you introduce them to these things. And as I look through the comments, it's kind of funny because, I could have this conversation in budget and other things too, this disengagement for the bar because people don't see the effects of the things that we're doing because we're not promoting them well, because we're not investing enough in the bar. And it's funny, I read one of the comments, one of the lengthier ones opposed to this is from an attorney I know very well, who regularly went to Tech CLEs on his own and also volunteered for an 8-week course on wellness, where he was doing 1 hour a week, reading a book, going over with a professional who does CLEs on wellness, Gina Cho. So while he's opposed to this, he also really likes these ideas. So I can speak to that. Honestly, I think there's a reality of when we ask people, hey, do you want us to control more of your life? The answer is 100% of the time going to be no. The reality is, I think when it comes to the DEI credit, the ethics credits, no one's really struggling to get those credits. And if they are, there are probably interventions that lawyer needs to get more engaged in this community to begin with. Like, it's not hard to get these credits. These options flourish. You can get all of your credits with the lunchbox, legal lunchbox, doing that every time it's available. You get, I think, almost all of your credits, if not all of them, for free. These are really good opportunities here. And I think, yes, people aren't going to want us to give them to take more control over their life. But when we do on this one, they're not going to notice except those who it does impact and help. And I think someone earlier mentioned, those who need the mental health aren't going to, get access to it. This is how we get sure that they do. If we mandate that everyone does a mental health credit every 3 years, then everyone is going to get one. And those who need a little bit of intervention to remind themselves are going to see this. This is not the solution. This is a small step that will help people and harm, even if they're opposed to it, harm no one. Thank you.
Todd.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Bloom, sorry.
Yeah, I had been kind of thinking about this, and one of the things that occurred to me was that we have these mandates or proposed mandates for continuing education, and I guess maybe I haven't looked at what bar admission requirements are with regards to coursework. Do we require mental health training and technology security training to be admitted to the bar, to take the bar exam? Are the subjects tested the bar exam? Does DEI appear on the bar exam anywhere? Is that a mandatory requirement for the bar exam? I mean, these are all important things. I don't mean to dismiss them, but it just occurs to me that, we're adding these on kind of after the fact. And certainly people who came up, 20, 30, 40 years ago, these topics were not, if they were discussed, you had them in undergrad or some other, source or method or whatever, but, they were just an avocation or something that you did outside of your law practice, outside of your stuff. And so, I mean, clearly the rise of technology you know, computer security has certainly taken on much greater interest and importance, you know, post internet and all this, but it just kind of occurs to me that, you know, we don't require it for the people to get in. Then once we get in, then they're like, okay, now you got this new batch of things that you got to be smart on. So I just thought I'd offer that comment for your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Anam, please.
I think this is called motion to split the question. I would like a vote on supporting the cybersecurity to be separated from the mental health. So, because I think I would probably vote different on one or another.
Would you take that as a friendly amendment to vote separately on these two?
Yeah, I guess I think if, you know, they can't stand on their own for both of them, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so would you second that?
I would.
You agree? Okay, then great. They're split then. We'll split them up by the vote then. Great. Okay, is there more questions or is this? Hearing none then? Great. That's
Okay, so we'll first vote on the motion for the Board of Governors to support this proposal with respect to cybersecurity. Governor Adewale, not present. Governor Angelo,
Aye.
Governor Boyd,
No.
Governor Couch,
Aye.
Governor Dresden, Governor Fay,
No.
Governor Kading,
No.
Governor Wynn,
No.
Governor Petrosic,
Yes.
Governor Pertzer, not present. Governor Rathbone,
No.
Governor Sayani, not present. Governor Stevens,
Aye.
Governor Williams-Ruth,
Present.
I have 4 ayes. 6 noes and 1 present, so motion fails.
next.
And the next vote will be on motion for the Board of Governors to support the proposal with respect to mental health. Governor Angelville,
Aye.
Governor Boyd,
Aye.
Governor Couch,
Aye.
Governor Dresden,
No.
Governor Fay,
No.
Governor Kading,
No.
Governor Wynn,
Aye.
Governor Petrosic,
No.
Governor Rathbone,
Aye.
Governor Stevens,
Aye.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
No.
I have 6 in favor, 5 opposed, motion passes.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks to all of you. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
I have a question of the board. I assume that when the MCLE board decides whether or not to move forward, they will reference the vote. I'm curious if the board is interested in us sending a letter and if you'd like us to, how we might go about drafting that in terms of capturing why one and not the other.
Somewhat related to that question, I would request board authority to submit a comment if and when this goes to a comment period before the Supreme Court on the related issue of the diminution of the number of general ethics credits.
Yeah, that's been.
So we'd want a motion probably.
I'm sure we can do that. So when made or something by somebody or no?
I so move.
I'll second.
So there's a motion to authorize Chief Disciplinary Counsel to make a comment with respect to the diminution of ethics credits. somebody.
Oh.
So with that,
You said.
is there also one, I'm gonna make one, for the board then as well? Like with,
Yeah.
I mean, then or.
Maybe we should vote on this, then we can take
Okay.
up that discussion.
I have a question. I want to see the letter before I vote on it.
Right, I mean, that's the question. First of all, we don't have to send a letter. We can just let the vote stand. People have access to the video. However, I think people often would like to understand, and it's difficult to capture the why because it's probably different for all of you. When and if this is proposed, there will be a comment period, so we should have time to do that. So I just appreciate some guidance on one, is that something we should work on? Two, how would you like it to be worked on? Do you want us to take a run at it in terms of staff and then bring it back to the board? Does the board want to form a group to work on it or designate someone to work on it, et cetera?
I think my preference would be just not write a letter. We have a vote, it's made, they can reference the vote. The meeting can be watched. I think that is a much better thing than us trying to add context to something afterwards on a thing where we're not commenting on. Yeah.
I agree with Governor Couch.
Okay. So should we vote on the motion to authorize Chief Disciplinary Counsel to make a comment then? Governor Angela,
Tara, I had a comment about that.
go ahead.
Regarding the ethics, the 6 ethics credits. So before we had the requirement for the equity, the DEI credit, ethics was 6 credits. And in the definition, it included as a topic that could be considered ethics was diversity and anti-bias. And so then when the last change, the last amendment that required the 1 credit in DEI, it's still in ethics. So you have to have 6 ethics credits. One of them has to be in the topic of DEI. So moving the 1 DEI credit out as a standalone doesn't really diminish the number of general ethics credits because you still have to have 6 total. So there's not a diminishment of the way the rule is currently. It just pulls the DEI out as a standalone.
I think I understand that, but I don't want to have a disagreement between staff going on at a public board of governors.
Well, yeah, no, I'm just pointing that out. I didn't want to make a disagreement about it. I didn't know if you understood it. So I just wanted to make sure.
But I think ultimately the effect of the change, the previous change and the proposed change would be a reduction of 5 general or pure ethics credits from 6. I think mathematically that's what's happening.
I'm going to vote yes for this in that I think that Chief Ende has considerable expertise, knowledge, experience, and I would just simply ask that it be written specifically as in his official capacity, but not on behalf of the association. But I believe that his input could be something that the court would look to even more so than that of the Board of Governors because of his experience. I would just ask that if the resolution passes, that is the spirit of which I'm voting yes.
All right, I'm going to resume the vote. So I had Governor Angela voting yes, Governor Boyd.
Yes.
Governor Couch,
Yes.
Governor Dresden. Your turn to vote.
Yes.
Governor Fay,
Yes.
Governor Kading,
Yes.
Governor Wynn,
Yes.
Governor Petrasic,
Yes.
Governor Rathbone,
Yes.
Governor Stevens,
Yes.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. And let's see, it's 4:07. We're a little bit ahead of time. I would take a 10-minute break. So
Okay, so 10-minute break, come back at 4:20.
sure. That's
Okay. We'll resume at 4:20 with what I think is our last topic of the day.